we were chatting with Ren and Micah, and the topic of asking better questions to your coaches, specifically in that episode, was about, hey, when we cap classes.
Right.
And you said something about it's not capping classes, it's the issues that it brings up. And it made me think of this. So, and I want to hear how we can help affiliate owners, but personally, almost every day I'll ask Roz, my wife.
This is a marriage counseling session? What are we doing?
It might turn into that, so help me out here.
But this is more my mom's lane, but I'll
be-
do my best.
I'll be like, hey, how are you? She's like, I'm exhausted.
Okay.
Right? And when you were saying that, it was like, okay, cool. Like, you say that, what does it mean? What things are happening? And when you say it, more importantly, what do you need me to do? Like, I'm exhausted doesn't mean I want to go to bed. It means the kids were crazy. I just made dinner. I've got 8 other things that needs to happen, and then I get to go to bed. Cool. So when you say exhausted, what you're telling me is help clean up the house, whatever that looks like. But you brought up the capping. It's like, it's not we cap. It's, what does that mean? It's, well, I'm not good enough at group management, or I'm not prepared to coach. How can you relate that?
So the point was this, meaning, so we just used capping classes as the analogy that we were referencing this idea to, which is when I'm going to make change inside of the affiliate, and if we use capping classes as an example, you're going to get pushback. And this typically will just end up in a bunch of friction between the coach and the owner, because they're like, well, we shouldn't cap classes. Like, we can't run this. We can't do this well. And all the owner hears is, I don't want to do this. Like, that is all that makes it to the surface level of the conversation.
Right. I'm exhausted. I don't want to do this. That's what we're hearing.
The answer, the answer they hear is no. And that's not what the owner wants to hear. But if you understand, I think if you reframe that, and if you understand what the coach is actually saying without saying it, and I'm not saying your job as a business owner is to be a mind reader, but if you ask yourself questions is like, why would they not want to do this? And it ultimately usually comes down to, if we remove the legitimately, we have a capacity issue, which is, I don't know, less than 1% of the time in my experience, the coach doesn't want to look bad. So if I know the reason that they're saying no, it's a soft no. It's not a hard no. They're like, hey, we shouldn't do that. That's a soft no. That's me pushing back on this idea that if you want to stop capping classes. And they're not saying no because they think that taking the cap off of classes is bad. They're saying no because they don't know how to manage a larger group of people.
More than 12 people at a time.
They're like, I can't do that. I don't want to look bad. That's going to be embarrassing. Then I have to deal with that. I'm already giving pushback from certain people in the class who are just, not troublemakers, but, the 9 a.m., right? And so addressing that and saying, hey, if we, we'll use the questions pull, answers push. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to stop capping classes, say, hey, what would need to happen for us to take caps off classes and for you guys to feel comfortable still running a great class?
Right, it's not just what would need to happen, because it's easy. Go and waterfly, go and push press, remove
to
it,
run
right?
a great,
but to
for
run
you
a great
specifically,
right.
like you specifically to run a great
And
class. Like,
that's
what are the things that you are immediately have a visceral reaction to about removing cap classes? And they say,
there's too much programming.
Right, it's too much time in the space. It's too crowded. Like, these workouts are creating logistical problems. And then inside of all of those realizations or those statements are solutions, which is like, hey, okay, how would we fix that? How can we program less? Is it all the classes, or is it one class? If that's the issue, then we figure out how do we manipulate, or how do we solve for this one class while still keeping all of the other classes largely intact, because you don't want to, you're trying to avoid only changing that class. I want to have a contingency that applies to all classes, not just the 5 a.m., because inevitably what will happen is they'll get a complaint from the athletes that workout was different than what the 9 a.m. did. It was different than the 4 p.m. And we can just bypass all of the, does it matter? The answer is no. It matters to that athlete. So how do I solve for that so that I can just avoid the complaint?
But it comes down to asking the right questions.
Ask the right question, or maybe not even asking the right question, just approaching it with a level of empathy to be like, hey, Why would they have pushback? Well, because they don't want to look like idiots. That makes perfect sense. And nobody wants to look like an idiot.
And then based on what they tell you, that's also finding the deficiencies in your team. It's
Correct.
Well, it's like the programming is too much,
too
or
much.
my coaches can't handle 16 people when it comes to group managers, so I need to train them.
Or don't
have enough wall balls.
We don't have enough wall bars, or we have, the equipment is now going to be an issue, meaning like we don't have enough of something, or the things that we're pairing together have large footprints for an individual athlete setup, meaning like I'm going to use a box.
Filthy 50s, right?
Well, yeah, I'm going to use a box. Filthy 50 is actually less of an issue because
small, yeah.
because you can, that's a waterfall. I can just run people through one station.
But you're right, a box, a row, or a
A
barbell.
barbell,
Yeah.
right. Now you're talking about a 200 square foot area for one athlete, and you regularly have 18 people in that class, and you don't have that much square footage. You're like, okay, that's a programming issue.
The solution there could often be, well, if we have X amount of people, this is what we recommend you do.
What's the collective contingency for the group, right? Hey, just hand them the solutions so they don't feel like they have to make it up on their own, and then help them with all that. Like when we had, this is maybe, I don't remember how long we've been doing this, but we've talked about it briefly on the show. Like when we changed our programming, maybe a year and a half ago, I had a lot of pushback from the coaches. So instead of saying me like, you guys can do it, it'll be fine, I said, what are you struggling with? And they're like, I'm struggling getting out of the whiteboard brief in a reasonable amount of time.
And it's very specific.
Right, very specific. And I
Specifics.
said, tell me how you give the whiteboard brief. And they said, give it like this. And I'm like, got it. Here, give it this way instead. The way you're doing it is unnecessary and clearly would take forever. Meaning, like, now that you're telling me that, I understand why this is stressing you out. So here's a different way to do that. And as soon as we got over that, we solved almost all of the problems. And it was just, they had to read the whiteboard brief differently. Okay, issue. It wasn't the programming. Right. It was literally the whiteboard brief. And I was like, okay, we'll change the format for the whiteboard brief.
If that was helpful, let us know in the comments. Kanan, I'm talking to you.